If you have any questions throughout the tasting, please use the chat function on the side, and then we'll try and put them to Geoffrey at the appropriate moments. We're just waiting for everybody to come in. Right, I think we're all in. I think there's about 25 of us in total. So evening, everyone. I'm Ben Grosvenor, Head of Retail and Fine Wine at Davies Wine Merchants, and I'm joined by Chairman James Davey and, of course, Geoffrey Ribeiro of Chateau du Moulin Rouge to present a tasting of the 2019 vintage from one of our favourite Medoc estates. Firstly, thanks for joining us in our second En Primeur at Home tasting, and also a big thank you to Geoffrey for showing this vintage to us. Obviously, with opportunities to taste the 2019s limited this year, merchants such as Davies have been receiving barrel samples direct from the chateau. So we saw this as a great opportunity to bring the wines and the En Primeur experience closer to you, introducing a little of what we try to look for when we taste from barrel in an unfinished wine. Of the 2019 vintage and the wine in question, Geoffrey will more ably talk us through it in detail, but it's a classic and very good vintage, exceptional in places. As is becoming the norm in Bordeaux, they had to endure some challenging growing conditions during the season, from wet and cold weather in June during flowering to intense heat and drought throughout July and August. But those were threats that were largely mitigated by moderating weather later in the season and by careful grape selection at sorting tables. I will now pass you on to Mr. James Davey, fifth generation chairman of Davies, to introduce our merchants to you. We'll then go to taste with Geoffrey over at the chateau. And as I said, if you have any questions, please use the chat function and we'll send those through as and when we can. Thank you, and thanks, James and Geoffrey.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I'd like to imagine that everybody here, if I can put it that way, knows a little bit about Davies. Very welcome, and if you don't and it's your first meeting with us, then nice to meet you. We are a family business, fifth generation family business, and our history, very briefly, started just off the Strand with what we called in those days a wine house called the Rising Sun, and developed over the ensuing what is now 150 years, which we're celebrating, inverted commas, this year. We weren't planning to have the inverted commas, but I got a laugh from Jerry, according to this screen. So it's not often I have to defer to another family business that is over double our age and makes us feel very young. But it's an absolute delight, and it has been a delight to get to know the Moulin Rouge family and wines over the last, actually only from our own point of view as Davies, only 10 years, because we were introduced to Moulin Rouge through another business which we purchased in 2010 called Mea Sorda, which some people might have heard of or come across. And one of the reasons we purchased Mea Sorda was to extend relationships that they had with some wonderful wineries and chateaux, and Moulin Rouge was one of them. And we haven't looked back. I think I'd like to say, Geoffrey, it was a wonderful meeting, and we've had some great experiences and business since then. And I've already said too much, so I'm going to pass over to you, Geoffrey, to introduce Chateau Moulin Rouge, which is why everybody's here.
Okay, so thank you, James. So we will talk about first the history of the chateau, the terroir, grapes, wines, etc. After, about the 2019 vintage, so about the weather, how is it compared to the previous vintages, etc. And after, we will do the tasting. So first, good evening, everybody. I am Geoffrey Ribeiro, co-owner of Chateau du Moulin Rouge. The first point is why Chateau du Moulin Rouge? Why is this name? Because we have an old windmill located on Cussac-for-Médoc, on the village, and it was built with red sand. So we had red reflects on the windmill, and that gave the name of the property, Chateau du Moulin Rouge. That's my family property for 13 generations. So it began a really long time ago in my family, at the beginning of the 18th century. And now I work with my parents and my sister, and we have also 4 workers. So we are 8 in total all along the year on the property. So for my parents, my father is more in charge of the vineyard and cellar. My mother more in charge of the tourism, wine trade, all the office staff, etc. And with my sister is more in charge of the vineyard and me more of the wine trade and the cellar. And for owner tourism, that's a bit everybody, it depends of the season. So I told you, Château du Moulin Rouge began 13 generations ago. So each generation brought something different. So for example, build other buildings, develop owner tourism, create a new wine as our second wine, for example, etc. Or extend the vineyard. For example, 40 years ago, the vineyard was around 16 hectares. Now we have 27. So that's just an example of the development of the property. We are located in Cussac-Fort-Médoc. So we are in Haut-Médoc appellation between great other appellations between Pauillac and Margaux and next to Saint-Julien. So we are in Haut-Médoc appellation. We have 27 hectares composed of 50% of Merlot, 40% of Cabernet Sauvignon, and 10% of Cabernet Franc. So as you probably know, the main grape varieties for the Bordeaux area. Our vineyard is planted on gravelly hillocks, and we have a temperate oceanic climate with generally mild winter and hot summer. So that's an ideal climate for good grapes ripening. And because we are really close of the Gironde, the river, we are protected of the frost. So we are not really subject about the frost. I think you have heard that recently in all France and also in Bordeaux from a few years ago, we had frost, so not in our vineyard because of our proximity with the river. So that's it for the terroir. Now I will talk about the estate philosophy. So we do a traditional Bordeaux wine growing and winemaking process. We are as well respectful of the environment. So I don't know if you know that we are HEV from the 2017 vintage. So what does that mean? High environmental value. The level 3 is the highest one. So to explain you, that certifies that the biodiversity elements are widely present in our estate and that the pressure of our agricultural practices on the environment is reduced to a minimum. So to give you a simple example, we take care of the environment. We don't treat a lot and systematically. Another simple example is that we have for used water a vat under the soil to keep our used water and not put it in the environment, and we will treat the water. So that's a small example that I can give you. And we have many others. Also about the vineyard, I told you that we have Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Cabernet Franc. And recently, we have planted 4 years ago Petit Verdot. So that's another grape variety that will add complexity and flavors, different flavors to our wine. And the first vintage with the Petit Verdot is 2019 that we will taste in few minutes. Furthermore, we do the end picking every year. So generally, that's at the end of September, beginning of October that we do that according to the maturity, to the weather forecast, etc. I think for this year it will be maybe earlier, probably mid-September. It can change, but for the moment we foresee for mid-September. During 2 or 3 weeks, we have 45, 50 people, the same families who come back, and a lot of work. To continue with the harvest, during this period, we do 3 sortings to improve and get always the best quality. We do 3 sortings, so 1 on the plot, 1 at the harvest reception with a machine, and 1 on a sorting table where we have 5, 6 people, and we remove piece of leaves, green grapes, stones, etc. All that we don't want. So we do 3 sortings to get just the best quality. And we do the traditional harvest reception with desteaming, sorting, and crushing. After, we have as well a traditional winemaking process with alcoholic fermentation in vat. And during this first fermentation, we adapt our extraction according to the vintage. So I don't know if you know that we do pumping over. I don't know if that's too technical or not, if I have to explain it or not. Maybe James and Ben can tell me. Yeah, I can talk about it. Okay.
Maybe very briefly, yeah.
Okay, so we are doing extraction with pumping over. So we have 2 parts in a vat: the liquid part, which is the grape juice, not yet wine, and at the top of the vat, the solid part. So we are doing pumping over. That is to say, we take from the bottom of the vat the juice, and we are spreading it at the top to extract anthocyanins, which gives the color, and tannins, which are mainly located on the solid part, so pips, skin, etc. And we are doing that every day, many times a day, according to the vintage. Also, after that, we are doing the pressing period, so we press, and we are after doing the second and last fermentation, the malolactic fermentation, as well in vat. After all this winemaking process, we are doing the aging. So every year we have a barrel aging of 1 year. So now, for example, that's the 2019, which is in barrel, from December 2019 until December of this year. That's French oak barrels, and we replace them by third every year. So we keep them 3 years maximum. And then we are doing the blending to have the same percentage of Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, etc. The same percentage in each bottle of new barrel and old barrels, etc. And we are doing the fining, the traditional Bordeaux method with egg whites, and then the bottling. I tried to sum up. I hope that's okay.
It's perfect, yeah.
So after all that, if there is no more question, we can talk maybe about the 2019 vintage. I mean the weather, etc. So it was, as you probably know, an exceptional vintage. So first, in winter, we had really dry winter with mild temperature, not frost actually compared to usual, and then early bird burst. So quite normal except the bird burst, but no problem. After, we had in spring, March, which was the same as winter, dry and mild temperature. In April, it was cooler. And you heard maybe about that we had frost in the vineyard in France in general, and also in Bordeaux. We had frost, but fortunately, as I told you, we are really close to the river, so we didn't have any frost in our vineyard, fortunately. And then in June, we had the blossoming. quite normal blossoming without any problem, not a lot of rain. It was totally normal. And after we had the summer really hot and dry, so that's really good for the maturity. We had a lot of sun, etc. And we had just a little, small rain beginning of August. So that was a good moment because it was the beginning of the veraison, and that's really good to have rain at this moment. In total, all along the year, we didn't have any disease pressure, so perfect. And after, of course, in September, we had amazing conditions with a lot of sun. And we had the harvest, it began the 27th of September, so not early, not late, but as usual, and until the 12th of October. So doing a bit more than 2 weeks. So really good harvest. I hope all is clear. And now we can talk about the tasting, if that's okay for you, Ben and James.
I think that's an excellent idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
The only phrase that you might want to explain is the veraison.
Yeah.
The veraison.
Yeah. What is a veraison?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. That's when the grapes are turning from green color to red. That's the veraison that we say in France, and that's a really important moment that we have generally in August.
Thank you.
So for the tasting, so first I would like to tell you what is the goal of our property in terms of wine type. We try to produce every year a wine typical of the region, with structure, complexity, with tannins, but also with smoothness and roundness. We don't want to produce a wine like we did, for example, 20, 30 years ago. That was the goal, to produce a wine with, of course, structure, complexity, but more tannins, more powerful. That's not the goal now. That's the reason why as well we have 50% of Merlot that gives something rounder and smoother. So as I told you, 2019 was an exceptional vintage. We have structure, we have complexity. That's something still smooth, so like we wanted. So I can show you, I have a glass and a bottle. So first, the appearance. I don't know if you can't really see with my screen, that's a bit small, but the appearance is red, of course, but if you bend your glass, you can see there that's a bit purple. So that's normal, that's because this is a young vintage. So for the moment it's purple. In few years we will talk about that. The color will change. So for the moment that's red, purple. After, nose and mouth. So of course the first thing that you can feel is the oaky flavors. Why? Because currently, as I told you, the 2019 is in barrel from December. So that's the moment where we can feel the most oaky flavors. Of course, it will change a bit in a few months, in few years after the barrel aging. So first, oaky flavors. After, we can feel red and black fruit aromas, as for example, blackberry, blackcurrant, which are really typical in our wines. We have still complexity, structure, we have body. because that was a great vintage. So we have body and we have tannins. So tannins for the moment not so smooth like 2015, for example, but that's normal. That's normal for a young vintage of just 1 year. In the end of mouth, you can feel spiciness, especially in the end of mouth, and there is a good length. 2019, because it was a great vintage, it has a great potential, and that's one that you can keep 5, 10, 15 years according to your taste. So if you like old vintages, you can wait 10, 15, or even 20 years if you really like old vintages. But if you like young vintages, that's trendy now, you can begin to drink it in 3, 4 years. So that's it for the tasting now. But how it will be in few years? So in 5 years, it will be still the same structure, still the same complexity, almost the same flavors in 5 years, but we change the color. It will be still red, but not purple. It will be more on ruby color. We will still have in 5 years good length, so little evolution, not a lot. But another example in 15 years, so it will be completely different. Of course, first the color will be more pale red, orange, typical for old Bordeaux vintage. We will still have structure complexity, but really smooth tannins, really smooth tannins compared to now. Still with a good length, but more on dried, jammy fruits compared to fresh fruits like you can feel now. And to finish, you can pair this wine, so in 5 years or 10 years anyway, you can pair it with white meat, red meat, comic cheese, and spicy food. That's not wine, of course, to drink for aperitif because of the complexity and the tannins, but you can pair it with a lot of meats. I hope all is clear, and if you have some questions, don't hesitate.
Excellent. Thank you, Geoffrey. Yeah, if you've any questions, please put them through on the chat. Yeah, I think the 19 is showing really very well. I'm finding lovely cassis to the nose, and I find a real richness to the fruit, but there's a lovely freshness there as well. The balance is great, and yeah, there's a lovely sort of integration to the oak as well. So it's a very good 19.
Thank you. We tried.
Thank you.
And okay. Something I didn't tell you, I have a bottle there. So that's our label. I don't know if you can really see it. Donc Château du Moulin Rouge in Médoc, the vintage. And we are Cru Bourgeois for around 40 years now. And I don't know if you heard about that, but from the 2018 vintage, they created a new ranking inside of the Cru Bourgeois with 3 levels, with Cru Bourgeois Exceptionnel, Cru Bourgeois Supérieur, and Cru Bourgeois. And I tell you that we are part of the ranking. We are Cru Bourgeois Supérieur, as you can see there.
Excellent. We have a few questions, Geoffrey, if we may. From Guy, we have, when did you last produce a wine of this quality? Which vintage?
The last vintage?
Yeah.
I think so. As exceptional vintages, recently we had 9, 10, 15, 16, 18, and 19. So last year, for
okay.
18, it was also an exceptional vintage with good conditions, good weather, good maturity, etc.
And in your mind, are any of those vintages comparable to this one?
I think more the 2010.
Okay.
We want to compare with a previous vintage, I think 2010. So still with structure complexity, with tannins, but not a lot of tannins like we had for the 9, for example. But tannins will be smooth like the 2010, I think.
Sure. John asks, how do you manage to keep the wine fresh and avoid over ripeness in these warm vintages?
How you manage to keep the wine fresh and avoid overripeness in one? So we do analysis. In September, we do the first analysis with our oenologist. And when the harvests are coming, we are doing more analysis. We check the anthocyanins and acidity, etc. And when the harvests are coming, we are doing that every 2-3 days. We check some plots, first the young plots and the Merlot, and we check with analysis. We also work in the vineyard every day or every 2 days to check if we don't have disease, etc. Yeah.
Okay. Another question. What's from Katia? What's the blend in 2019?
So the blend of the 2019 is 50% of Merlot, 40 Cabernet Sauvignon, 8 Cabernet Franc, and 2% of Petit Verdot.
Okay. And what does that Petit Verdot bring exactly? What should we be looking for?
So Petit Verdot, that's really good for the complexity, of course, because we don't have any more 3 vintages, but 3 grape varieties, but we have 4. So that add, of course, complexity, flower flavors like violet, a bit more tannins. Yeah.
Okay.
That, that's 2%, so that's something a little bit different, but not a lot. But we have a bit more complexity now.
Okay. Francis asks, do you foresee any problems attracting pickers this year to work the vineyard by hand?
That's a good question. For the moment, we don't really know. Yeah, due to the current problems, crisis, we have two teams, if we can say, the local people and people from southwest of France. We don't really know how it will be, if it will be dangerous or not, if we have to wear a mask or etc. We will see, because the situation can change. We are thinking about that, and we will see what we will do. For the moment, we don't really know, but
Sure.
we think.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Good luck. Do you use sulfur in order to help the wine remain stable?
Yeah. We use sulfur just a little bit when we enter the harvest. We do that, and after the second fermentation, we add a little bit. Of course, that's not as lot as in sweet wines, rosé wines, etc. Because in red wines we don't need a lot, but yes, we use a little bit.
Okay. Excellent. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll probably leave it there. But I think that was a great tasting. Thank you, Geoffrey. It was lovely to have you talk us through the wine now and what it will look like in a couple of years. Fascinating. Thank you. Okay, well, we will conclude there. Thank you again to Geoffrey, thanks to James, and thank you to everybody joining us. I would remind at this stage that this is one of the best value wines from the 2019 vintage that we offer, and I think that's offered in the UK. It's under £8 a bottle under bond. So at £95 a case under bond, we still have some in stock. So so feel free to send any orders over. But thank you again, and we'll see you at the next tasting, hopefully in person.
Yeah, see you hopefully. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Best wishes, and thanks very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.